Good afternoon. In honor of Valentine's Day, I would like to do something a little different for this video. We'd like to tell a ExJW/JW love story that spans 25 years. This is my partner, Emily. I was raised in my congregation, born into it. And when did you come into our congregation?
I moved in when I was 10.
Okay, so I would have been 13. And I don't think we really noticed each other that much at first. But after a couple years...
Well, you left right away. The congregations were readjusting and your family moved away.
Right, that's right. So they changed the borders of the territories so that me and my parents went to a different congregation. So we were kind of apart during that period. You were homeschooled?
Yeah.
And I was in public school. And when I turned, whatever age you turn for high school, we moved back into your congregation, my old congregation territory. And that moved me out of my original school district. And my parents pulled me out of public school for a variety of reasons. I can maybe talk about that some other day, but some of them were very JW specific, wanting to shield me from influences because I was starting to get involved in music, and they were worried that I was going to take up with the wrong crowd or whatever, or get too involved in extracurricular stuff. So they pulled me out, and then what happened?
Well, my dad was giving a talk he was giving the public talk on Sunday, and another family invited your family and my family over for lunch after that. And that was the first time I noticed you.
Okay.
Because I wrote about it in my journal.
And so then we were kind of in the same homeschooling group, right?
Right.
Many of the outings or, field trips and different things we would do with the homeschooling group were hosted by your family.
Right. My mom would set up and do science stuff or art stuff for the kids in our congregation that were all homeschooled.
Right. And so that's when we really got to know each other more. However, how old would we have been then?
Well, I was 12 and you were 15.
Okay. So definitely too young to date in the eyes of Jehovah's Witnesses. Even, just to get to know somebody better. Anything that smacks of dating is very frowned upon if you're not marriageable age.
Which I wasn't.
Right. Well, neither was I. And but we both secretly liked each other.
Yeah.
So you already mentioned the diary. You want to talk a little more about that?
Well, I recently, about a year and a half ago, after Danny and I got together again, pulled out all my old journals from 12 until early 20s. And most of them had your name on every single page.
And I don't have that kind of evidence. I still haven't seen this evidence. You've just told me about it.
Yeah, you don't want to see that. Well, I can show you your name, but...
I fancied myself a poet when I was 15, and I wrote it was loose leaf paper, lined loose leaf paper that was probably 6 pages long, no joke. That was all about you, a poem, and it ended with an acrostic at the last... how many letters in your name?
5.
The last 5 lines, spelt your name, if you know how an acrostic works. I wish I had that today, so I could share that with you, but who knows what happened to it. So the point is we were both secretly pining away for each other at an age when we couldn't date. There's a lot that happened in the next 8 years. Just before I turned 19, I moved out.
Right. That was a very sad day in my journal.
Yeah. I had started dating somebody else by this point. Right. Now, the question that always comes up when we tell the story is, why didn't we date when we finally could?
Right. For me, I have always known that I wanted to have kids. And after getting to know you and knowing who you were at that time, kids was not an option for you.
Right.
And so I had always comforted myself with that fact.
Yeah.
We couldn't date because I wanted kids and you didn't.
So we basically just decided we wanted each other to be happy,
Right.
but that wasn't going to happen together.
Right.
So when I turned 19, or just before I turned 19, I moved out. At the time, I was dating somebody. It turned out to be a very difficult relationship. It was a relationship of convenience that was pretty toxic. And at the time, I was dealing with depression and a lot of other things. So I learned a lot about myself, but it wasn't a good relationship. I was out as a bachelor, including the time that I was dating. I was out with roommates as an active Jehovah's Witness for 2 years. And then, in order to get my life back in order, from my perspective then, I moved back home. I went to school to become a massage therapist, and I started working out regularly. And I was pioneering. And where were you at this point?
Did you and I pioneer at the same time?
I don't remember that.
I don't think we did.
No, I think you pioneered after me, right?
I don't know, because I pioneered through college, and I started that when I was 17 and finished when I was 19 or 20. 19, because I moved out when I was 20.
All right, so you were already done then.
Okay.
Because that would have been when I moved back just before I turned 21.
Okay.
Because I was out for almost exactly 2 years.
Okay.
Out on my own. So I started working out, regular pioneering, and I don't want to give a whole lot of details about this, but I started dating somebody else, and I got married.
That was hard on me.
Yeah, but you've said that you were just hoping that I was happy.
That's right. I just wanted you to be happy, and whatever that meant for you.
Right. An important detail
Right.
is that the week that I got married, I did something very unorthodox, and I asked you to go out for coffee.
Right. And we went to St. Somewhere, which was a coffee shop that was one of the cool places in town. And I don't remember what we talked about.
Neither of us can remember the conversation, but we both remember it happening. The premise was that this is going to be our first and last opportunity to do this. Because I was going to be getting married, and, well, that drew a line in the sand, obviously. And I didn't do that with anybody else. You were the only one. So we went out, had coffee, and talked. I would love to hear that conversation again, but maybe it's more fun to just imagine it.
Maybe.
Anyways, I got married, and that's right around the times that my doubts started. I went through a period of 12 years of struggling with doubts and panic attacks, and that's a whole different story that I'm not going to get into at the moment. Fast forward in my life, 12 years. Is there anything you want to include about those 12 years? We can tell your story at some other point if you ever want to.
Yeah, I had moved on with my life. You had gotten married. I moved on. I ended up getting twins through foster care and then adopting them. And then not long after that, I was disfellowshipped.
Right.
So you had a nice long stretch of shunning me.
Yes, I had a very negative opinion of you and your family. Emily is one of the fortunate ones whose parents didn't shun her. And at the time, I had a lot of judgment around that because that was seen as prideful. If you are a Jehovah's Witness, I'm sure you can relate to that. The average person would think that sounds ridiculous to see it as prideful to not shun your own child. But I had a lot of judgment about you and your family, which I'm ashamed of now. At any rate, you were disfellowshipped. Years went by.
Well, and I tried for a year to get back in, and when I couldn't, I just decided to move on with my life. There wasn't anything else I could do.
Right.
And so then we didn't see each other. I mean,
Right.
for that year that I was disfellowshipped and trying to get back in, I was still going to all the meetings. But then after that, we didn't see each other for a long time.
I heard stories about you. I know that people loved it when you would say hello to them in a real chipper voice, knowing that they're supposed to be shunning you.
Just trying to be friendly.
Right. And now I think that's awesome. At the time I thought, again, how prideful or arrogant or manipulative or who knows what kind
Human.
of... Right. Exactly. Yeah, shunning is their thing. It's not our thing.
Right.
So fast forward to me disassociating in September of 2014. I will maybe save this story for another time. I'm not sure how much I want to share about my personal experience. But I won't now because it doesn't relate to our story directly. So I disassociate, and I'm living in a campground, and an associate's uncle let me use his camper, and that campground I was staying in was 5 minutes away from her parents' house. And like I said, I had a lot of judgment about the family, and it was a little bit of a mental hurdle to get to this, but I thought, you know what? I need to go and talk to them. I need support. I need community. I should go visit them. And so I did. They were the first inactive Jehovah's Witnesses, or what you could call former Jehovah's Witnesses, that I spoke to after exiting. And so it was a little weird, people that I was accustomed to shunning and judging so harshly for so many years. And I walked up to the house. Your brother was there, and he said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I said, "I'm good. I disassociated." He says, "Really?" And he came down off the porch and gave me a big hug. And he says, "Mom and Dad are out back." So he took me around the back of the house, and I saw them walking up.
So while you were talking to Mom and Dad, Ethan, well, I live right next door to my parents, and Ethan grabbed my son, who was playing between our houses, and said, "Go and get your mom and tell her that Danny Weeby's here."
And I had no idea that she lived next door. Truthfully, when I came to their house, I was there to visit them, and I saw kids running around, and I recognized the twins, the ones you adopted because you adopted them when you were still a witness. But I didn't know who the other kids were.
Yeah. Well, and we had a friend over, so then there was an extra kid.
Right, there was 5 kids.
Yeah.
So I figured that, the twins were maybe staying with Grandma and Grandpa, visiting or whatever. But it never entered my mind that you live next door.
Well, so I had built a house next door to my parents, and at that point I had only been in the house a year. So it wasn't like, oh, I bought the house next door or something. It was a fresh thing on the property. So Jack came down to get me, and he said, "Mom, Danny Weeby's at Grandma and Grandpa's." And I was all flustered. I was like, "Really? Okay." And I put my hair up, and I took my hair down, and I put a sweatshirt on, and I took a sweatshirt off. I don't remember what I ended up with, but I was
you had a sweatshirt on.
Okay.
I remember the sweatshirt.
I was like, all right, this is ridiculous. Just go up there and be normal. And so first I asked Jack, is he with a group of people? Because I was trying to imagine under what circumstances would you be at my parents' house.
Right.
And I thought, well, maybe they stopped out in service for some reason. This was a Sunday afternoon. Later afternoon, though. And he's like, "No, just come on." And he needed to get back to playing. So I walked out, and I came around the corner of the garage, and I saw you sitting there. And when you looked up and saw me, it was the same feeling that I always used to get when I would see you at the hall or whenever I would see you. And it was just this feeling of being home. So you stood up, and you gave me a hug right away. And
I stood up. You gave me a hug. Yeah, you didn't waste any time. You walked right over and gave me a big hug.
And so as we were pulling away, Mom said, well, he disassociated.
And then you came in for a second
And
hug.
I said, oh, that needs another hug. And so I gave you a second hug.
Yeah, and we did a lot of talking.
Well, and at this point, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I knew you disassociated, but I had no idea, doubts, or anything that had led up to this. And I was so curious about what your journey was. And there was so much conversation happening between my parents and you and my brother. And then there's 5 kids running around. And I just was like, oh, I just want to talk to him so bad. And I don't want anyone else to talk right now.
and I don't remember all the conversation. I know I listed off some of my doubts. I asked you guys some questions about where you were at, with your beliefs. I remember you asking me if I read Crisis of Conscience. I was about a third of the way through at the time.
Okay.
And then we exchanged numbers.
Right.
But it was...
Well, we were comparing notes about people that we knew that were out.
Right.
And I said, I'll give you so-and-so's number.
Right, yeah. I had a friend that I hadn't seen. I knew he was out, and I would like to reconnect with him. I mean, there's a lot of people that you were friends with that are still in. And so, at least in my mind, people might not believe this, but it was totally innocent. Yeah. When we exchanged numbers, it was just a matter of wanting to bring people up to date because we were in the same peer group.
Right.
Right. At this point, I think we both kind of assumed our lives had diverged so much.
Right. I was super excited to see you again, and I got all the flutters and everything the same as when I was young, but I didn't think that meant anything had changed for where we were in each of our lives.
Right, and where you were at this point was...
Still, I had kids.
You had 4 kids, right. And I should just say here that as a Jehovah's Witness, I never wanted kids. I've thought about making a video just on this subject. Basically, I had a lot of worry about 2 things: raising somebody in this wicked system, and then also fear of disappointment. Fear that the kid's going to turn out to be something awful, with the worst case scenario being that they leave the organization. And in my mind, be leaving me. I have better language for that now, and I can say that I couldn't get my head around the idea of having a child that I couldn't love unconditionally. I wasn't permitted to love unconditionally. So by the time that I made my exit, my biological clock was kind of ticking. My perspective had changed. I mean, I was 36, and I started to think, you know what? Maybe I do want to have kids. But we hadn't talked about that yet.
No.
So we exchanged numbers, and we texted a couple times over the course of the next week.
Well, first I said, I don't have my kids next weekend.
Right.
They were going to be at their dad's. And I said, do you want to just go get coffee and we can just catch up?
Yeah.
Because I felt like I really didn't hear your story or about what was going on with you. I jumped in the middle of the conversation you were having with Mom and Dad and my brother. And so I really wanted to just hear about the last 10 years of your life.
Right. So we had a couple text messages. We arranged a place to meet. It was a tapas bar, small plate. Yeah. Right.
Just opened. Neither of us had been there before.
Yeah, and I thought, oh yeah, I've been curious about that place or whatever. And we made the date, but I didn't think of it as a date until the night before. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that I was going on a date with Emily. And so I had about a day for that to sink in. And
I didn't know that was your intention.
By the time I arrived at the restaurant, I had an agenda. I thought I really want to kiss her. So the whole thing was all about manipulating you to that point. No, just kidding.
It worked.
Yeah, it did kind of, didn't it? But at any rate, we sat down and we just immediately felt comfortable, at least I did, and just fell right back in. We were talking, sharing plates, having 1 or 2 glasses of wine. And then it was getting towards, we had been there long enough, so I said, do you want to go for a walk? Through historic downtown West Bend. And she said, sure. And so we went for a walk. Behind this restaurant is the River Walk, so you're right along the Milwaukee River. Yeah, it's a real nice spot. And we just stopped and talked, and I said, after we were talking for a while...
Well, I loved this, because you were talking.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you interrupted yourself, and you said, can I just give you a hug?
And you said...
Yeah.
And so I gave you a hug, and it was a good hug.
Yeah.
Did I go in right away?
You kissed me on my cheek right away.
I think I kissed you on your neck right away.
Okay.
And you...
And you said, I've always wanted to do that.
Okay.
And I was super excited because, I mean, I knew how I had felt about you my whole entire life, but I didn't have any confirmation that my feelings were returned. And when you said that, I was just over the moon.
Well, I remember your response. But you almost immediately said, I'm in a relationship.
Right. So I had been seeing someone and it was not going well. I had already decided even before I had seen you on that Sunday that it was over and I needed to, the next time I didn't have the kids, I was going to end it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to do it in person.
But that didn't happen yet and you wanted to have good boundaries.
Right.
So we were leaning against this older cement wall next to the river.
It was like a concrete barrier.
That was really abrasive, and I was leaning against it, or we were leaning against it, and I said, can we go somewhere more comfortable? And I meant, like, somewhere else along the Riverwalk. And you're like, we can come back to my house.
I didn't have an agenda at that point. I really didn't.
No, I know.
You know, I didn't want the night to end, and I just wanted, you know, I imagined us sitting on the couch all night and talking.
Right. Which is pretty much what
Pretty
happened.
much what happened.
Yeah. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, I was, well, here in this house virtually every day, even though by this point I had moved from the campground to an apartment that was closer to my work. It was a week-to-week apartment, and I was paying week-to-week to never be there, basically just to store my stuff. Yeah. And so it just seemed kind of silly. And so we just talked about it and decided that I'd move in. But first...
So you and I talked about it, and we thought this was a good idea.
We weren't sure at first. We realized that there were problems with being rushing into it too fast.
Right.
You know, we talked a lot about the fact that, like, we wouldn't do this with other people.
Right.
This would seem unwise with other people, but does the fact that we have 25 years of history, although interrupted, and that we felt this way before, this isn't all brand new.
Right.
We've thought about each other a lot. We know each other. Does that make it different? And I think we decided it probably did.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
But it was important to me that the kids had a say in the final decision. That if any one of them felt like they weren't ready for it, I totally wanted to respect that. And so we had agreed that we would talk to the kids that next night or something, like maybe even that night. No, probably the next night. And that afternoon, I was on the way home.
And I had already spent a lot of time with the kids.
Right. One of the first conversations he had with Jack was who your favorite superhero was, which was really great. All my kids love superheroes, and so does Danny.
Yeah, I'm a big superhero geek. I collect action figures. Actually, you can see one of them right now. That's the Joker from the 1989 Batman movie. So as a toy collector, I was in good.
The kids were just astounded at your collection of guys.
Right. So, okay, carry on.
Okay, so that afternoon I was driving home with the boys, and Jonas, my youngest, said, "Is Danny going to be there when we get home?" And I said, "No, but he's going to come over for dinner when he's done with work." And it was Kyle, right?
I think so.
Kyle leans over and he goes, "Mom, why can't he just move in? He's over here all the time anyways." And I said, "Well, how would you feel about that?" And they were all like, "Great, that would be awesome." And so I checked in with each of them, and I said, "Well, let's just check in with Zoe when we get home." And we talked to Zoe about it, and she was like, "Yeah!" So then that night at dinner, Kyle actually asked you how you would feel about moving in.
Did he?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, I felt really blessed. I mean, the way this whole thing played out, I'm not totally sure what I believe about destiny and all that stuff, but the things that led up to my disassociating for about a year and a half, and then the things that happened immediately after disassociating, it really felt like it was meant to be. Yeah. And I never could have predicted it, and it could have gone very badly. I mean, I know when people leave the organization or are kicked out of the organization, it can be awful. And I'm not saying it wasn't awful at times. Brutal, in fact. But the fact that I had this to come to was a incredible blessing. And so I'm really thankful.
Me too.
So here I am with my partner Emily, living right next door to her parents. I can look out this window and see the house that we used to play at together. We can go walk in the woods where we used to play and see the old barn foundation, and it's something that keeps me tied to my past, where I don't feel like I've had to give up everything, that I've lost my whole past. You've made a bridge for me, and that's really important. So I love you.
I love you back.
Thank you for listening, and happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.